Today we're going to go through chapter 8 of Jubilees, which talks about the division of the world into 3 parts by Noah. After Noah's Ark lands on Mount Ararat, where Turkey meets Armenia, eventually Noah's kids and grandkids start to fight amongst themselves. And Noah decides that they're going to create a lottery and they're going to assign the 3 boys, the 3 children, to different places. One should go north, one should go east, one should go south, essentially. And this is what happens. And then in chapter 9, it's subdivided among their children. But I want today to just go through this chapter 8 using both the modern English version of Jubilees that is new and you can find in the description, and Google Earth, so that we can actually trace these places and see for ourselves exactly how I was able to come up with the maps that I've been coloring in. And so let's go through this together. This is such an important part of history. It's like the missing part. It's the missing link. How did we get from the creation of the world to the world we know today? This story is so important in understanding that. According to the writing, Shem's lot was the middle of the earth for him to take as an inheritance for himself, for his sons, and for the generations for eternity. From the middle of the Riphean mountain range. So where do we find the Riphean mountain range? It's called the Ural mountain range. Let's write this in. All right, this is the beginning of the range, but this range is actually all down here. This is the Ural mountain range, and this is where this division begins. And this is the first boundary that we hear about. The Riphean Mountains are the Riphean Mountains, identified with the Ural Mountains. This large mountain range running vertical through Russia has classically divided between Europe and Asia. When we think of the division between Europe and Asia, it starts around this area, the Ural mountain range. Russia and what we think of as Europe, that has become more and more Russia as Russia encroaches, which is just the reality. When you study these old maps of how the divisions were supposed to look, you understand that Russia is encroaching way beyond any normal boundary that existed in ancient times that was respected. So from the middle of the Riphean mountain range, from the mouth of the water of the Tanais River, his lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the waters this river comes from. All right, so what is the Tanais River? The Tanais River is the Tanais in Greek, or this is the Don. The Don is one of the biggest rivers in Europe. It's the 5th longest river in Europe and flows through Russia. In antiquity, it was the border between Europe and Asia by Greek geographers. Okay, so we just said that the Riphean mountain range, which is around here, was a dividing factor, which classically divided between Europe and Asia. And the Tanais also classically divided between Europe and Asia. And so we understand that the classic division between Europe and Asia goes from the Don River. Let's find the Don River here. Okay, so it goes all the way. Rostov-on-Don is the beginning of the Don River. It goes out like this and over like this. It makes this sign here. So we have this sign here. How do we know that this is the right one? Let's keep reading. This river, this Don River, empties and pours into the Me'at Sea and goes into the Great Sea. What is the Me'at Sea and the Great Sea? Me'at in Hebrew is the small amount, and the great here is the larger amount. And this is specifically talking about the Meiotis, which is what it's called in Greek and Latin, or Sea of Azov. This is the smaller sea that the Don River flows into atop the Black Sea, which is above Turkey. All right. Everything north of this is Japheth's. All that is south of it is Shem's. Okay, and so we've just made a boundary here. Using the Don River, which goes out like this. This is the Don River, and the Ural mountain range is here. Now, how do we know exactly what this boundary is supposed to look like? Let's figure it out together. From the middle of the Riphean mountain range, so that's around here, from the mouth of the river, of the Tanais River. Okay, what is the mouth? The mouth is where it touches another river. And so the mouth is literally right here. This is the mouth of the Don River, also known as the Tanais River, right here. So through the middle of this river, until it approaches the abyss of the waters this river comes from. Okay, so now we get the exact boundary. Very, very clear. This is the boundary. The boundary is that it goes straight here, and when it reaches this mouth, instead of turning, it's going to go straight, and it's going to connect straight to the middle of the Ural mountain. And that is the boundary. This is the boundary, and it's saying Everything above this is Japheth's, and all that is south of it is Shem's. Why is this significant today? Is because if this is the ancient boundary between Shem and Japheth, it means that Russia has been encroaching down this whole area here below where the mouth of the Don River, which is right here, anything below this mouth of the Don River and this boundary where it hits the Ural Mountains, anything below this belongs to Shem, belongs to a totally different sun. So the fact that Russia is in any of these areas down here is just wrong. It's just absolutely wrong. Let's keep going though to understand all the boundaries. That is the first boundary to understand, and it's a boundary that is generally respected if you keep going east, because that continues to be the boundary. Kazakhstan and Mongolia are part of like what we consider to be Asia, as opposed to Russia, which is sort of its own thing at this point. But this boundary is generally maintained through all the Eastern world, and that's what we understand, is that all that is south of it is Shem's. The lot goes west through the middle of this river until it approaches the abyss of the water this river comes from the middle of the Riphean mountain range. The lot goes west. This river empties and pours. Okay, so the understanding is that this is the borderline and it keeps going east, and that's really what we see in today's maps and how we understand how the ancient world is so connected and this ancient story is so connected. We see the boundary there. Not only do we see the boundary there, by the way, but later on we're going to see that it talks also about North America, where pretty much the same boundary is maintained between America and Canada. This boundary is basically continued a little bit south. Let's see where it would be. Yeah, it's really right around there. Pretty cool. All right, let's keep going. It extends until it reaches Karaso. What is Karaso? Karaso we know as the Rhinocuria, known in the Bible as the River of Egypt. And this is the Rhinocuria. It's called Wadi El-Arish. And basically, it is called a wadi sometimes and a river sometimes because it fills with water during certain seasons. And it goes like this. That is the wadi. 1, 2, 3. But in the Bible, it talks about this river of Egypt, but then it also talks about the importance of one water to the next water. And so this boundary line that we know of today between Israel and Sinai is very ancient, actually. It is an averaging out of this Wadi El-Arish so that one water can connect to the next water for this piece that belongs to Israel according to the Bible. It extends until it reaches Karaso, which is within the tongue that looks toward the south. That's talking about the Sinai Peninsula. His lot extends along the Great Sea. It extends in a straight line. So the Great Sea, classically in the Bible, is the Mediterranean Sea, and that's what it is here. It extends in a straight line until it reaches the west of the tongue that looks toward the south. So we already said that the Rhinocuria, the Karaso, which we said is the Rhinocuria associated with Wadi El-Arish, a river valley that fills with water after the rain, emptying into the Mediterranean Sea at El-Arish. This was ancient Egypt's border with the Holy Land, known as the river Nahar of Egypt, or the Wadi Nahal of Egypt in Isaiah and Genesis. But what's interesting is that it continues. It says, it extends until it reaches Karaso, which is within the tongue that looks toward the south. Verse 14, his lot extends along the Great Sea. It extends in a straight line until it reaches the west of the tongue that looks toward the south. This sea is called the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. So this was really confusing at first, but basically when it says a tongue, it's just saying a triangular shape. So the first tongue is Sinai. But then when it says it extends along the Great Sea, it extends in a straight line until it reaches the west of the tongue that looks toward the south. This sea is called the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. It's saying that the tongue is going to be a sea, and that this tongue that's called a sea is called the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. What is the tongue of the Egyptian Sea? It is this area here, which we know of as the Nile Delta. Lashon Yam Mitzrayim is referred to in Isaiah as well. Lashon, tongue, Yam, sea, Mitzrayim, Egypt. This is the Nile Delta. And now that we know that this is the Nile Delta, we can continue with this very, very clear outline of these ancient boundaries. So it extends in a straight line until it reaches west of the tongue that looks toward the south. The sea is called the tongue of the Egyptian Sea. It turns south from there toward the mouth of the Great Sea on the shore of the waters. And that's going towards here. This would be the mouth of the Great Sea on the shore of the waters. It extends west to Ophrah until it reaches the waters of the Gihon. And the Gihon is the Blue Nile. Basically, the Blue Nile is going like this. And so it's saying that the westernmost boundary of this land that is still belonging to Shem that we're talking about, it extends west to Ophrah. Ophrah is Africa, until it reaches the waters of the Gihon. So this is around here. And to the south of the waters of the Gihon, to the banks of this river. What is the banks of the river? So the Gihon we know is the Nile, specifically the Blue Nile. The Nile, specifically the Blue Nile in Josephus' Antiquities and the Septuagint. It extends eastward and, okay. So it goes to the banks of this river. So basically it's this westernmost point of this Nile. This is the boundary that we're understanding here. Let's make sure. It extends west to Ophrah until it reaches the waters of the Gihon, to the south of the waters of the Gihon, to the banks of this river, meaning the lands that are around it, to the banks of this river. So this whole area. It extends eastward until it reaches the Garden of Eden to its south. And this is how we understand that the Garden of Eden is in this region of Africa, because it's a boundary marker right here. It extends eastward until it reaches the Garden of Eden to its south. At first, I thought this could be like the Far East, but as we continue to read more, we're going to understand why this actually does have to be somewhere in this region. From the east of the entire land of Eden and of the whole east, it's talking about the east of Africa. It turns around and continues until it reaches east of the mountains called Rapha. So basically, it's taking us back to those Riphean Mountains, this boundary over here, and it's saying Shem's lot is included all the way back until you get to here. It then descends to the bank of the mouth of the Tanais River. The bank of the mouth meaning to the Sea of Azov and to the Black Sea. And why is that important? Saying, just to be clear, it continues until it reaches east of the mountain called Rapha. It then descends to the bank of the mouth of the Tanais River, meaning here. Meaning the Sea of Azov. Now notice that there is a natural boundary between these pieces of land, okay, to the banks of this river and here, and then this would be the natural boundary marker because there is water that goes through it. So everything on this side belongs to Shem and everything on this side belongs to Japheth, but we did have a natural boundary already in this area, so we know that Russia encroachment into here is unfair and wrong. And in chapter 9, it goes through the subdivisions, and you see how west of this boundary is one sun and east is a different sun. And so you understand that Russia's been encroaching on various sons of Japheth's plots. And so it really is in the wrong and out of control. All right, it then descends to the bank of the mouth of the Tanais River over here, that they should have it forever for all generations, meaning this land belongs to Shem and not Japheth, and so it shouldn't even belong to Russia, and Russia is encroaching, and it's not cool. Noah rejoiced that this portion was chosen for Shem and his sons, and he remembered all that his mouth had spoken in prophecy. He had said, "Blessed be God, the Lord of Shem, and may God dwell in the tents of Shem." He knew that the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies where God dwells. Mount Sinai is the center of the desert, and Mount Zion is the center of the navel of the earth. These three were created as holy places facing each other. So this is an interesting little verse to talk about for a minute. Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies. We just learned that the Garden of Eden is somewhere in this land, around the Horn of Africa, around Ethiopia. And that is the Holy of Holies where God dwells. Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, we now believe it to be somewhere around here. And Mount Zion is the center of the navel of the earth. Of course, that is Jerusalem. And these are created as holy places facing each other. And so it goes Zion, Sinai, and down, 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 we have somewhere over here, the Garden of Eden. And so if we had to guess the Garden of Eden, it is somewhere in this region here, but we don't know exactly. But the people over there can probably understand even better where the Garden of Eden is. But that's where we understand it to be. It's because it says it's in these three were created as holy places facing each other, which has to mean in a line. Because if it meant these 3 points facing each other, as in a triangle, it could be literally any 3 places on earth. It's not saying anything. But if it's saying they're facing each other, it likely means in a line. And so we understand Zion, Sinai, and so around here we have the Garden of Eden. He blessed the Lord of gods, Noah, blessed the Lord of gods, who had put the word of God in his mouth. He knew that a blessed lot and a blessing had come to Shem and the children of his generations forever. The entire land of Eden, the entire lands of the Red Sea, and the entire land of the east, India, on the Red Sea and the mountains of it, all the land of Bashan, the lands of Lebanon, the islands of Caphtor, which is Crete. And so we understand that these 2 islands also belong to Shem's lot. The mountains of Senir, Amana, and Ashur in the north, also all the lands of Elam, Ashur, Bavel, Susa, Media, these are like Persia, all these Asian areas. Media, all the mountains of Ararat, Turkey, Armenia, and the whole region beyond the sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur to the north, a blessed and prosperous land. Beyond the sea, it's probably talking about this sea, which is beyond the mountains of Ashur to the north, yes. Assyria, Ashur, Assyria, a blessed and prosperous land. All that is in it is very good. The second lot was for Ham. Beyond the Gihon toward the south, to the right of the garden, it extends toward the south and to all the mountains of fire. So now we're talking about Ham. Beyond the Gihon toward the south, to the right of the garden, so now it's talking about this area. It extends to the west and to the Sea of Atil, the Atlantic, and goes further west until it reaches the Sea of Mizrak, the sea to which all that was not yet destroyed descends. And this is saying Mizrak is that which is thrown, or it could also be machuk in another translation, meaning wiped out, erased. It's talking about the deeper part of the ocean where the giant sea creatures live. It gets its own name, but it's basically saying all of South Africa belongs to Ham and the Hamites. I didn't go into all this, but basically Syria, Crete, the Hermon, Lebanon, Damascus, Syria, all of this is part of the plot of Shem. Susa is part of Iran. Assyria, we said Babylonia. Bavel is Babylon, which is Iraq. All right. So it continues north to the borders of Gadir. And what is Gadir? Basically, it's going all of South Africa, all of Africa, until it goes to the border of Gadir. What is Gadir? Gadir is Cadiz, Andalusia, Spain. Cadiz, Andalusia, Spain. Here we've found it, and it's right here by this tip, and it's saying this area, this is the boundary of Ham. This is the boundary of Ham, of Ham. And so either it goes to like right here above this little tip, or it just is this boundary by the water, which is probably more likely, but I really don't know. So this is the boundary right over here. This is the boundary between Ham and Japheth, which makes a lot of sense. That is what Gadir is. It continues to the coast of the sea waters, to the waters of the Great Sea, which we said is the Mediterranean Sea, until it approaches the Gihon River, which is this Nile. So this area, this is where it stops. It goes along the Gihon River until it reaches to the right of the Garden of Eden. This is how we know for sure that the Garden of Eden is in Africa, in this area of Ethiopia, likely. Because it's talking about it goes with the Gihon River, which we know to be the Nile, until it reaches to the right of the Garden of Eden. And so it's something over here, which is going to be now talking about how the Horn of Africa does belong to Ham. This is the boundary. There are these mountains of fire. Did we say that? Yeah, it says it extends to the south and to all the mountains of fire. The mountains of fire are a volcanic mountain range around here by the Horn of Africa. All right, this is the land that is Ham's lot, that he will keep for himself and the children of his generations forever. This land of Africa belongs to the Africans, belongs to the Hamites. For Japheth, there is a third lot. Beyond the Tanais River, so now we're doing basically the remainder. Beyond the Tanais River, which we said is the Tanais, that goes like this. Beyond the Tanais River, to the north of the exit of its waters. It extends to the northeast, to the whole region of Gog. Okay, this part really clarifies because the exit of the waters is by the Sea of Azov, and it's saying just north of the exit of its water, meaning just north of the Sea of Azov, where the waters of the Don River flow into the Sea of Azov and then the Sea of the Black Sea. You go northeast from there and hit through the middle of the Rafah, the Riphean mountain range, and then continue east. Gog is one of the sons of Japheth, and it's referring to the lands of Russia and to the country east of it. And this is the reference to North America. And the boundary is right around here between Canada and America. Amazingly, it's the same idea of the boundary that we're going to have going around here. So, and to the country east of it refers to North America, belonging to Japheth, the north of North America. It extends northward to the north. It extends to the mountains of Celt to the north. That is about Ireland. So basically, it took us all the way around. It spun us around. It spun us around the globe. Let's zoom out for this one. For Japheth, there's a third lot. Beyond the Tanais River, to the north of the exit of its waters, it extends to the northeast, to the whole region of Gog, that's Russia, and to the country east of it, that's the north of North America. It extends northward to the north, the whole north of the globe. It extends to the mountains of Celt to the north and toward the Sea of Mizrach. So the mountains of Celt we know as Ireland. So here we got to the top of the earth, and here we are right by Ireland. That's super cool. And toward the Sea of Mizrach, meaning this ocean here that we were talking about before when it came to Africa. This whole ocean here is being called the Mizrach because it's very, very deep. So it extends to the mountains of Celt to the north and towards the Sea of Mizrach. It goes on to east of Gadir, which we said was Cadiz. This area right here goes on to, meaning it goes south to, essentially, this region, to the east of Gadir, okay, and it goes around here, east of it, as far as the region of the waters of the sea. So this would be this sea here. It extends until it approaches the west of Farah. Farah is Aferag, or Africa. So it's saying it extends until it approaches the west of Farah. So this was confusing at first until I studied chapter 9, and then I understood that it's actually saying, go to the ocean here, okay, extends to the mountains of Celt to the north, toward the Sea of Mizrach, goes on to east of Gadir, as far as the region of the waters of the sea. It extends until it approaches the west of Farah. It's talking about the west of Africa. Why is it referring to the west of Africa? Because there's some islands here, which is very interesting because until today, you have places like Tenerife, which is part of Spain, actually. And this always confused me. Why is Tenerife part of Spain? Why are these islands part of Spain? In the ancient times, we see this division of the world includes west of Farah. The things that are west of the mainland of Africa, these islands, apparently belong to Japheth. And so we see Spain rules. And other ones are ruled by the UK, so still belonging to Japheth. So these islands are part of Japheth's plot. Extends it until it reaches west of Farah. It returns toward Aferag. This Africa, and it extends to the east, the waters of the Sea of Me'at. How does it get to the waters of the Sea of Me'at? Perfectly, because we said that these islands, including Caphtor, belong to Shem, and we know that this Sea of Azov is a boundary marker. And so it's saying it extends until it reaches west of Farah, returns toward Afarag, it extends to the east and to the waters of the Sea of Me'at. The Sea of Me'at is here. And so it's saying this boundary goes, Caphtor belongs to Shem, the boundary goes right through here, because Greece is part of Europe, and it's Yavan is one of the children of Japheth. It goes right through here. Now, how do we get to this boundary? We said there's water here. There's actually also a division right through Istanbul, and that is a boundary. And that's why in ancient times, this area was such a meeting point for the ancient world, because literally Japheth's plot met Shem's plot, and then through the water, African's plot, Ham's plot, could come and visit, because there are ways to get through. So this is the boundary right here, right here. Amazing. It's amazing how clear it is. It extends to the region of the Tanais River, which we said is the Tanais, the Don, to the northeast until it approaches the boundary of the waters toward the Riphean Mountain. And it turns around toward the north. So it's repeating the same boundary we already talked about, which is this river meeting the Riphean Mountains and going and turning around until it goes toward the north. And then we have these boundaries that are clear to us today, where Russia is part of Japheth, the northern world is part of Japheth. We talked about Ireland's part of Japheth. We talked about the north of North America part of Japheth. And we talked about these very, very clear boundaries between Shem's plots, Africa's plots, and Japheth's plots. This is the land chosen for Japheth and his sons as the lot of his inheritance for him to settle for himself and the children of his generations forever. 5 great islands and a great land in the north. It is cold, so it's basically saying that all these islands in this area, the islands are all part of Japheth's plot. The islands here, and the islands here, the islands here, all the islands of the north, everything west of Caphtor of Crete, belong to Japheth, even those west of Africa. 5 great islands and a great land in the north. It is cold in the land of Ham. It is cold, meaning Japheth's land is cold. The land of Ham is hot. The land of Shem is neither hot nor cold, as it is a blend of cold and heat. And that's all we're going to do is chapter 8. We've gone through it. It's crystal clear, and these boundaries are so important to understanding the history of the world. This is like such an important thing. Honestly, this blew my mind when I uncovered this as I was doing this translation of this amazing text called Jubilees. So hope you enjoyed and learned something. Let us know what you think in the comments below. If you find yourself in these borders, if this relates somehow to any conflicts in your area. And that's that. It's great to do this again after many months since I did it last time, because it only gets more and more clear and amazing each time I go over these boundaries. And here I've given you the text itself to go side by side so that you can see this is an ancient text. This text, we have copies of it dating back to around 250 or 300 BCE from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It is an ancient text. At that point, there are 15 copies found from that period, so it was already known at that point. This book, Jubilees, is part of the Holy Bibles of the Ethiopian Tewahedo Church, meaning the Christians of Ethiopia, as well as the Jews of Ethiopia. So it's part of the Ethiopian Bibles, all of them. And it's a holy book. It is purported to be from an angel given to Moses at Mount Sinai. And this portion tells the story of Noah's children and how we have the world as we know it, why we have things like Europe and Asia and Africa, how these became entities, how these boundaries that we know today came to be over time. And again, it helps us to understand the conflicts, like we talked about the Russian conflict and also the Israeli conflict. The Canaanites, Canaan was a son of Ham, and in chapter 9 he is assigned West Africa, and then we see how he actually goes and settles the land of Israel, and he was cursed because of it. Also the Philistines, who land in the Gaza area, they were Mizraimites who had settled in Caphtor for a time, and so they were also breaking this oath, and so they were also cursed for doing that. These boundaries are important, the idea that like people have control over their territory and over their continent and over ruling their own continent. We also see in Europe right now a sort of takeover in a way, because they took in like tens of millions of refugees. And so you see like majority of the ruling people in certain European countries now are actually Africans or Middle Easterners. And so they're actually not supposed to be ruling in that land. And the takeover is concerning because people need to know that they have a place. It's important for everyone to feel like you have a place in this world, and everyone does have a place in this world. So I hope through this mapping, you found your place in this world and know where you belong. This is a more universal world that we live in right now. And so, especially in the Western world, it's a whole new world, and things aren't as clear there in terms of the boundaries, but everyone has their place. I hope that everyone has a place that they can call home, and if not, that you travel and find that place. Again, it's a multicultural world, and there's something very beautiful in that, but there's also something beautiful in knowing these boundaries and knowing where we come from and knowing our history in God and the reality and truth of the Bible. Jubilees is a perfect cross-reference for the biblical text, the Torah, the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, and I'll leave it there for today. Thank you so much for watching and for listening. Have a wonderful day. This is Modern Jubilees, and we'll see you next time.